Welcome to God Loves the LGBTQ community. I'm Pastor Chester Hitchcock, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the use of proper gender and sexual identity terminology. How am I qualified to explain these terms? Well, first, because I have been guilty of using the wrong terminology often enough to receive enough corrections to seek out and search how to do better. Second, because of that research, I'm not going to simply be sharing my opinion based on my experience, but rather referencing resources of those who deal with LGBTQ issues in an environment that is not limited to specific regional or community groups and gatherings. Specifically, I'm going to be referring to the Gender Health Training Institute that you can access by their website that is listed here as well as in the comment section below. When you go to that website, click on Professionals Glossary of Terminology. Now, the reason that I chose that website was because one of my YouTube subscribers referred me there. I have had several helpful comments and even conversations with some of my YouTube subscribers on this issue. Unfortunately, I wasn't always getting the same advice about what terms were right and what ones were wrong, even from my LGBTQ friends. Why was I getting mixed advice about terminology by those who themselves are LGBTQ+? Well, Professionals Glossary Terminology from the Gender Health Training Institute explained it this way, quote, "It is important to note that the language surrounding both gender and sexual identities is constantly evolving. The beauty in this is that the more terminology we have to describe ourselves, the more visible we become. The downside in this ever-evolving landscape of language is how easily our knowledge becomes outdated. In some cases, what is considered appropriate to one cohort may be derogatory to another. Another difficulty is the lack of universal agreement about the definitions of many terms." So I guess that means that regardless of my efforts to try to get all of my terminology correct, I'm probably still going to mess up sometimes, and other times it might simply be a matter of how some people in different regions or countries around the world use the terms differently. Nevertheless, I intend to be as accurate and respectful as possible, and I beg your forgiveness when I make mistakes. So as I briefly summarize some of these terms, I encourage you to check out the Gender Health Training Institute if you want a deeper understanding. Let's begin with the word cisgender. Cisgender is a term reflecting individuals whose gender corresponds with their birth sex. The word is derived from the Latin root cis, meaning on this side. For example, if a baby is born with a vulva, it is categorized as a girl or female, and also if she sees herself as a girl throughout her life, then she is considered cisgender. Similarly, if a baby is born with a penis, he is categorized a boy or male at birth, and also sees himself as a boy throughout his life, he is considered cisgender. Now, as a cisgender man, I have become aware of privileges that I enjoy that people who are LGBTQ do not have. Such simple things as being addressed with proper pronouns, or being able to use the bathroom that corresponds with my gender without any issue, or not understanding what it feels like to have body parts that don't feel they represent who I am on the inside. Also, I recognize that there are tragic discriminations that I never face as a cisgender male. Discrimination occurs when LGBTQ individuals and groups are faced with unjust and prejudicial treatment. Discrimination can take many forms, including both individual acts of hatred or justice and institutional denials of privileges normally accorded to other groups. You see, we often put the burden of marginalized groups to defend themselves from discrimination, failing to recognize that all, men and women are created equal. Thankfully, those of us who are Christian should, and I emphasize should, recognize that God didn't leave us to defend ourselves. The Christian message is about Jesus advocating on our behalf, about Jesus coming to the earth as an ally for us. This is why I have chosen to be an advocate and ally for the LGBTQ+ community. When Christians don't advocate for those who are marginalized, when Christians don't serve as allies for those who are being discriminated, they fail to recognize what true Christianity is all about. As a pastor, my goal is to change the perception that many Christians have placed on Christianity. So let's look at the meaning of an advocate and an ally as it is explained in the Professional Glossary of Terminology at the Gender Health Training Institute. Let's consider the meaning of advocate. An advocate is someone who publicly and actively works to end tolerance, educate others, and support social equity for a group. An advocate works to support and help those who feel that they are not being seen and heard or respected, and helps to ensure that their rights are being respected and considered seriously. What about an ally? An ally is a person who actively supports specific groups of people or causes, and an LGBTQ+ ally publicly speaks out in support of justice for the LGBTQ+ communities. Now, while it sounds like the same role for an advocate as it is for an ally, there are a few differences. Both actively speak out in support of a specific people or a cause, but an advocate, according to the Gender Health Training Institute, is one who publicly and actively works to end intolerance, educate others, and support social equity for a group. But let's be clear, whether you consider yourself an ally or an advocate or both, anything that you do in support of marginalized people or groups will be appreciated if you are sincere. I would encourage you to check out my video that is titled Allies Needed when you come to the end of this video. I will just make a quick mention of the letters LGBTQ+. It is an acronym for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, and plus to include others as well. It is explained more in my video that is titled LGBTQ+ flags and symbols. Another term to consider is the term closeted. Closeted also is referred to as in the closet. It describes people in the LGBTQ+ community who aren't publicly open about their sexual or gender identity. Closeted is understood as opposite of being out. Some people may be out in certain communities, but closeted with others, often due to a fear of discrimination or rejection or even violence. A term that was really new to me was the term coming in. Coming in refers to the process in which a person first acknowledges and accepts and comes to the understanding of their own sexual orientation or gender identity for themselves, but have not yet shared that with others. It reflects the private and often emotional place one comes to in the process of making decisions about sharing their gender and or sexual identity with others. Then there is the term coming out, also described as coming out of the closet, a phrase that refers to a very deeply personal process of accepting one's sexual and or gender identity and begins to share that with others. Coming out is often a series of moments and conversations that may include openly identifying as LGBTQ+. Some people choose to keep their sexual gender identity private, while others decide to share those with a few close friends or family, and sometimes even the public. Then there is the term pride. Pride is a celebration of standing open in one's own identity against oppression, beginning with the Stonewall riots at the end of June of 1969. Pride Month, which is June, is a celebration of how far the LGBTQ plus community have come in terms of fighting discrimination and injustice and accepting individuals' authenticity. From a time when gay and trans clubs were raided by police regularly until now, and the celebration of Pride is a remembrance of where those in the community came from and a reminder of how far society has yet to go. Then there is transphobia. Transphobia reflects a range of irrational fears, hatred, disbelief, mistrust, and intolerance of transgender people. Transphobia can come in many forms, including an aversion to or a prejudice against trans people. Many people hold transphobic beliefs because they were taught to them, perhaps by parents or family growing up, as such beliefs are often culturally generational. As a pastor, I would also add that there is a history of misinterpreted biblical passages that also cause this. The Gender Health Training Institute, with their professional glossary of terminology, breaks some of the specifics down this way. There are those who identify as agender. The person who identifies as agender does not identify with any gender. It can be seen as either non-binary or genderless. There are those who identify as androgynous. An androgynous person expresses themselves by merging stereotypical feminine and masculine characteristics or presenting themselves mainly with neutral characteristics. Then there are those who are bigender. A bigender person identifies as two genders. In other words, male and female, or male and androgynous, or agender, or any other combination. There are those who identify as butch, though in some groups, butch is derogatory, in others it isn't. As an advocate and ally, I am very careful about using this term unless I am certain that the individual chooses that identity for themselves. Butch is a term that is used to describe a person who expresses masculinity regardless of their gender. In a lesbian community, a butch is a masculine identified lesbian who identifies as a female who is attracted to women. As for those who are transgender, transgender, also referred to as trans, is a broad term used to describe individuals whose gender identity is different from that which is assigned to them at birth. Transgender people often undergo hormone treatments and gender-affirming surgeries to align their anatomy with their core identity, but not all desire to go through that or can afford it. A transgender man is a person whose sex assigned at birth was female, but whose gender identity is male. These identities can also refer to someone who was surgically assigned female at birth. In the case of intersex people whose gender identity is male, many trans men simply identify as men. The term non-binary is an adjective describing a person whose gender identity falls outside the traditional binary categories of male, female, man, woman. Non-binary people may define their gender as including both male and female by falling somewhere in between, or they may identify as different gender or genders altogether. Also, sometimes they call themselves genderqueer. Transgender woman is a person whose sex assigned at birth was male, but whose gender identity is female. Then there is the term called affirmed gender, referring to the announcement of the doctor it's a boy or it's a girl, based on what the physical anatomy looks like. In other words, boys have a penis and girls have a vulva. Affirmed gender is the biological state of male or female assigned at birth. Based on this, you are supposed to grow up and be and exist within certain sets of gender roles. The terms sex and gender are associated, but they are not the same, nor are they interchangeable. Biological sex is determined by chromosomes, XX for female and XY for males. Hormones, estrogen, progesterone for females and testosterone for males, and internal and external genitalia, the vulva, the clitoris, the vagina for females, and the penis and testicles for males. Considering the possible variations of these factors, biological sex should be defined as a spectrum or a range of possibilities rather than a binary set of two options. And one example would be the Klinefelter Syndrome, usually diagnosed in adult males, in which they are found to have an extra chromosome. You can see this in my video that is titled Born Gay. Then there is the term intersex. At one time, the term hermaphrodite was used, and I mistakenly used that term in an earlier video, not aware that it has been outdated and by some is seen as derogatory. An intersex person is one who was born with reproductive sexual anatomy that doesn't fit the traditional binary categories of male or female. Sometimes they are born with both male and female genitalia, or neither fully developed. Some intersex people are assigned a specific sex or birth through surgery. If their external genitalia are not obviously male or female, they are just assigned one or the other. And some intersex babies are assigned a legal sex at birth. They grow up to feel that their gender doesn't match the sex that was selected for them. As I studied the Professional Glossary of Terminology on the Gender Health Training Institute website, I discovered that from a professional perspective, many of the terms are not necessarily needed or even used by the average LGBTQ+ person or their advocates and allies, unless they are involved in a professional situation such as transitional planning or preparing or medical needs and cares. For this video, I decided to not cover all of the professional terms, but if you are interested, I would encourage you to check out this website. As for me, I hope to do better in my future videos regarding proper terminology. If you are LGBTQ+, I hope and pray that you will forgive me when I mess up. I also hope that this video has been helpful to you. If so, hit that like button and leave me a message and tell me what you think. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, slam that subscribe button and ring the bell and choose all so that you can get a notification when I produce a new video. I love you all, and God loves you all the more. See you next time.